Rain hammered the tin roof of the suburban train station, turning the empty platform into a sheet of black glass. It was past midnight, and the last train had already pulled away 20 minutes ago, leaving the station hollow and silent except for the wind rattling the old signboard. Dante stood near the far pillar, hood up, eyes scanning every shadow. He wasn't here for a train. He was here because one of his shipments had gone missing 3 nights ago, and his sources told him the man responsible for the leak would be passing through this exact platform tonight. Dante ran the logistics side of his family's business in Chicago, and though most people only saw the polished suits and the quiet authority, very few knew how far he'd go to protect what belonged to him. He checked his watch. Nothing. No sign of the courier he was expecting. Then he heard it. A small, broken sound, almost swallowed by the rain. He turned toward the far bench, half covered by the station's crumbling awning, and saw her. A woman sat curled into herself, arms wrapped tightly around a black duffel bag, her whole body shaking. Her lips had gone pale, almost blue at the edges, and her breath came out in short, uneven puffs of fog. She wasn't dressed for this kind of cold. A thin cardigan, soaked through, clung to her skin, and her dark hair was plastered flat against her face. Dante's instincts, sharpened by years of watching people for signs of danger, told him this wasn't a trap. This was a woman freezing to death in front of him. He crossed the platform in quick strides. "Hey," he said, crouching in front of her. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused, glassy. Stay back," she managed, her arms tightening around the duffel bag like it was the only solid thing left in her world. Her name, though he didn't know it yet, was Chloe, and even half-conscious, some deep, stubborn instinct in her refused to let go of that bag. "I'm not going to hurt you," Dante said, keeping his voice low and steady, the same voice he used when talking down men twice his size in tense negotiations. "But if you stay out here another 10 minutes, you're not going to make it. Do you understand me?" She tried to answer, but her teeth were chattering too hard to form words. Her eyelids sagged. She was slipping. Dante didn't wait for permission. He peeled off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her shoulders, then lifted her off the bench, duffel bag and all, because he could tell that trying to pry it from her fingers would only cause a fight neither of them had time for. She was heavier than she looked, but he barely registered the weight, his focus locked entirely on getting her out of the cold. That was when the headlights swept across the parking lot. Dante's whole body went still for half a second, the old, practiced stillness of a man trained to notice threats before they noticed him. An unmarked black sedan rolled in fast, tires hissing against the wet asphalt, and slowed near the station entrance. 2 men stepped out, scanning the platform with the kind of sharp, methodical movements that told Dante exactly what they were. Not police, not anyone official. Hunters. He ducked behind the pillar, adjusting Chloe's weight against his chest, angling his body so his coat covered both of them in the dark. Her breathing was faint against his collar, but she was still breathing, and right now, that was the only thing that mattered. The men fanned out, one walking toward the far end of the platform, flashlight cutting through the rain. Dante's SUV was parked on the opposite side, near the service entrance most people didn't know existed, a habit from years of never parking, where he could be boxed in. He moved. Keeping low, sticking to the shadows along the station wall, he carried Chloe away from the platform, each step deliberate, silent, controlled. Behind him, he heard one of the men mutter something sharp, frustrated, the kind of voice a person used when they'd lost something they were sure had been right there. A flashlight beam swept dangerously close to the pillar he'd just left. Dante reached the SUV, wrenched the back door open, and laid Chloe carefully across the seat, cranking the heat to full before he'd even shut the door. His hands, usually steady enough to count cash in the dark without a mistake, were moving faster than he wanted them to. He looked back once at the station. The two men were still searching, flashlights crossing over empty benches, over the puddle where Chloe had been sitting minutes ago. Whatever they were looking for, whoever they worked for, they had no idea she was already gone. Dante slid into the driver's seat and pulled out slowly, headlights off until he'd cleared the lot, watching the rearview mirror the entire way. Only once the station had disappeared behind a curve of wet trees did he let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. In the back seat, Chloe stirred weakly, murmuring something under her breath. Dante caught only one word, repeated twice, urgent even in her half-frozen state. Don't let them find it." He glanced at the duffel bag, still clutched against her chest, rain dripping steadily off its edges onto the leather seat, and for the first time that night, Dante felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just a woman he'd saved from the cold. Whatever was inside that bag, someone wanted it badly enough to hunt for it in the middle of a storm. And now, whether she realized it or not, Chloe wasn't just his responsibility. She was his problem to protect. Chloe woke to the smell of antiseptic and the steady beep of a machine somewhere near her head. For a moment she didn't move, didn't even open her eyes fully. Just lay there trying to piece together where she was and how she'd gotten there. The last clear memory she had was the cold. A cold so deep it had stopped feeling like cold and started feeling like sleep, pulling her under. Then her eyes snapped open. The bag. Where was the bag? She sat up too fast, and the room tilted around her, IV line pulling at her arm as a wave of dizziness hit. A soft blanket slid off her shoulders. She was in a small, private room, warm light coming from a lamp in the corner. Nothing like the harsh fluorescent glare of a normal hospital. An older man in a white coat stood near the window, watching her with calm, patient eyes. "Easy," he said gently. "You gave yourself quite a scare. My name is Dr. Vance. You've been asleep for almost 14 hours. "Where's my bag?" Chloe said, her voice cracking, ignoring everything else he'd said. "The black duffel bag." "Where is it?" Before the doctor could answer, the door opened and the man from the platform stepped in. Chloe recognized him instantly, the sharp jaw, the dark eyes that had looked at her like she mattered in the middle of that storm. He was carrying her duffel bag in one hand, holding it out toward her without hesitation. "It's right here," Dante said. "Nobody's touched what's inside. I didn't open it." Chloe grabbed it and pulled it against her chest, checking the zipper, running her fingers along the seams like she was searching for something specific. Relief and suspicion fought across her face in equal measure. "Why should I believe you?" "You don't have to," Dante said simply. "But if I wanted whatever's in there, I would have taken it, while you were unconscious on my back seat. I didn't." Dr. Vance stepped forward, checking the monitor beside her bed. "Your core temperature dropped low enough that we were genuinely worried, young lady. Another 20 minutes out there, and this conversation wouldn't be happening. You're lucky Dante found you when he did." Chloe looked between the two men, her mind racing to catch up. "Where am I? This isn't a hospital." "It's private," Dante said. "A clinic that doesn't ask questions and doesn't file reports that end up in public systems. Given the circumstances, I figured that was safer for you." "Safer how? You don't even know me." "I know two men in a sedan were searching that platform looking for something the second I got you into my car," Dante said, his voice steady but edged with something sharper underneath. "And I know you told me, more than once, not to let them find it. So no, I don't know you, but I know you're in trouble, and I know it followed you to that station." Chloe's grip on the duffel bag tightened. She said nothing, but her silence told him he wasn't wrong. Dr. Vance cleared his throat and gestured toward the bag. There is one more thing you should know before you get too attached to carrying that around. Dante nodded at him, then looked back at Chloe. When I picked you up, that bag was soaked through, same as your clothes. I noticed the lining felt strange, stiffer in one spot than it should have been. So this morning, while you were still asleep, I had it checked. Chloe's stomach dropped. You went through my things. I checked it for exactly one reason, Dante said, unfazed by the accusation. Because whoever was hunting for you last night wasn't guessing where to look. They already knew. He reached into his jacket pocket and set a small object on the rolling tray beside her bed. It was no bigger than a coin, thin, matte black, with a hairline seam running along its edge. A tracker, Dante said, sewn into the inner seam of your bag. Professional grade, the kind that doesn't show up unless you're specifically checking for it. Whoever put that there has been able to follow this bag's exact location for who knows how long. Chloe stared at the small device like it might come alive and bite her. Her hands started to tremble again, this time not from the cold. That's not possible. I only had this bag for 3 days. I never let it out of my sight. You didn't have to, Dante said quietly. Someone got to it before you ever left your office. That means whoever wants what's inside has been watching you a lot longer than you realized. The color drained from Chloe's face. She thought back over the last few days. Every place she'd carried the bag, every meeting, every late night at her desk auditing files she probably shouldn't have looked at as closely as she had. If they'd been tracking the bag this whole time, they knew everything. Where she worked, where she lived, every place she'd gone since she found what she found. I need to leave, she said suddenly, swinging her legs off the bed, ignoring the way the room spun. I can't be here. I can't put anyone else in danger. I just need to… You need to sit down, Dante said, stepping closer, his tone firm, but not unkind. Running out that door right now, weak, exposed, with no idea who's watching for you, is the fastest way to get caught. Or worse. And staying here with you is safer? Chloe snapped, though there was more fear in her voice than anger. I don't even know what you do. I don't know why you're helping me. Dante was quiet for a moment, studying her the way he studied every problem before deciding how to solve it. I run things most people don't ask questions about, and normally, I'd agree, that should worry you. But right now the tracker is gone, they don't know where you are, and the only thing standing between you and whoever's hunting you is me. Chloe looked down at the duffel bag in her lap, then at the small black device still sitting on the tray, proof that her old life had already slipped out of her hands sometime in the last 3 days without her even noticing. She didn't trust him, not yet. But she didn't have anywhere else to go. The elevator doors slid open onto a floor that felt like it belonged to a different world entirely. Chloe stepped out slowly, still weak on her feet, taking in the wide windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, the city lights scattered below like scattered embers. Dante's penthouse sat high above downtown Chicago, quiet and fortified, the kind of place designed so that nobody could reach it without someone knowing first. You'll be safe here, Dante said, setting her bag down near the couch. Doors reinforced, cameras on every entrance, and only 3 people besides me know this address exists. Chloe wrapped her arms around herself, looking out at the skyline instead of at him. Safe. Right. Because that's worked out so well for me the last 2 days. Fair, Dante admitted. He walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and set it on the table in front of her without a word. The kind of small gesture that asked for nothing in return. But you're still here, still breathing. That counts for something. Chloe sat down slowly, wincing as her body reminded her how close she'd come to not making it. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the city hummed faintly, distant, and unaware of the danger, sitting behind reinforced glass, 30 floors up. "You want to know why they're after me?" Chloe finally said. "It wasn't a question. I want to know what I'm protecting," Dante said. "There's a difference." Chloe let out a short, humorless laugh. 10 days ago, I was just an auditor. Boring job, spreadsheets, quarterly reports, nothing anyone would finish over. I work for a firm that handles books for logistics companies across the Midwest. 3 weeks ago, I got assigned a new client. Routine audit, standard paperwork. "Let me guess," Dante said. "The paperwork wasn't standard. The numbers didn't add up," Chloe said. "Not in a small way. Not in a someone forgot to carry a decimal way. Millions of dollars moving through shell accounts. Invoices for shipments that never existed. Payments routed through 3 different countries before landing somewhere nobody could trace them. I almost missed it. I would have missed it if I hadn't stayed late one night, cross-referencing old files nobody was supposed to still have access to." Dante's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes sharpened. "Whose company?" Chloe hesitated, glancing at the duffel bag like it might answer for her. "A man named Marcus Vane runs it. On paper, it's a legitimate freight and logistics firm. Underneath that, it's something else entirely. I didn't understand what I was looking at first. I just knew it was wrong, so I copied everything onto a drive before anyone realized what I'd found, and I ran." The name hit Dante harder than he let show. Marcus Vane wasn't just some rival with a grudge. He was the head of a syndicate that had been eating into Dante's territory for over a year, undercutting shipments, poaching clients, always staying just clean enough on paper to avoid consequences. Dante had spent months trying to find a legal way to cut him down, something concrete enough to use against him without dragging his own family's name through the same mud. And now, sitting across from him, shaking and exhausted, was the one person who might have already found it. The actual evidence, not just numbers you remember, the real thing. Chloe nodded toward the duffel bag. "Encrypted hard drive. Everything I found before they realized I'd found it. Bank routing information, shell company registrations, transaction logs, going back almost 2 years. It's all there. I just haven't been able to open half of it. The encryption is heavier than anything I've dealt with before." Dante walked over and crouched beside the bag, studying it the way a man studies something dangerous and valuable at the same time. "Do you understand what you're holding?" "I understand it's the reason 2 men chased me through a train station in the middle of a storm," Chloe said, her voice tight. "I understand it's the reason I can't go home, can't call my sister, can't do anything except sit in some penthouse with a man I met 12 hours ago." "You're holding the one thing that could take Marcus Vane apart," Dante said quietly. "Not through violence, through the law, through his own investors turning on him the second they see what he's been hiding." Chloe looked up at him, confusion flickering across her tired features. "You know him. He's been trying to destroy everything my family built for over a year," Dante said. "I run a legitimate logistics business, Chloe. Whatever assumptions you've made about me since last night, most of what I do is protect small operators from men exactly like him. Marcus doesn't play by any rules, except the ones that benefit him. If what's on that drive is real, it's not just evidence, it's a weapon." "I'm not a weapon," Chloe said sharply, some of her exhaustion burning away into something firmer. "I'm an accountant who did her job and found something she wasn't supposed to find. I don't want to be part of some war between you and him." "You already are," Dante said, not unkindly, just honest. "The moment you copied that drive, you stopped being a bystander. I'm sorry. I know that's not what you wanted to hear." Chloe pressed her palms against her eyes, breathing slowly, trying to steady herself against the weight of everything crashing down at once. When she finally looked up, there was something new in her expression, exhaustion mixed with a stubborn kind of resolve. "If I finish decrypting it," she said. "If I hand this over, it ends. Marcus goes down, those men stop chasing me, and I get my life back." "That's the plan," Dante said. "And if I don't trust you either," Chloe said, watching him carefully, "what happens then?" Dante held her gaze, steady, unwavering. "Then you're still safer here than anywhere else you could run tonight. That's not a threat. It's just true." Chloe looked down at the duffel bag sitting between them, holding more power than either of them had fully understood until this conversation, and for the first time since the platform, she let herself consider that maybe running into Dante hadn't been bad luck after all. Maybe it had been the only thing that could save her. Dante was still awake at 3 in the morning when his phone buzzed against the kitchen counter, a short, sharp vibration that meant one thing: trouble. He read the message twice, his jaw tightening with every word. His head of security had picked up movement on a signal trace, a personal cell phone pinging off a tower 2 miles from the penthouse, moving in slow, deliberate circles, like someone testing the range of a search grid. The number matched a name flagged in Chloe's file from the moment Dante had first pulled her records. Her own phone. He crossed the living room and found her curled on the couch, half asleep under a blanket, the duffel bag still within arm's reach even in sleep. "Chloe," he said, keeping his voice low but urgent. "Where's your cell phone?" She blinked awake, disoriented, then reached instinctively toward her jacket pocket. Her face went pale when her fingers closed around the shape of it. "I forgot I still had it. I turned it off. I swear, I didn't want to lose contact with my sister completely." "Turned off isn't off enough," Dante said, already moving toward the window, scanning the street below with the kind of focus that came from years of expecting the worst. "A phone like that pings towers even in standby, especially if someone's actively hunting for the signal. And someone is." Chloe sat up fast, the last traces of sleep gone entirely. "They found it? They found me? Not yet. But they're close enough that it doesn't matter how they found it. What matters is we move, before they narrow it down any further." Dante was already pulling on his jacket, grabbing a set of keys from a hook near the door. "Get your shoes now." She didn't argue. Whatever doubts she still carried about trusting him, the urgency in his voice erased them instantly. She shoved her feet into her shoes, grabbed the duffel bag, and followed him to the private elevator, her heart hammering against her ribs. Downstairs, in the underground garage, Dante led her past his usual SUV toward a heavier, reinforced vehicle built for rough terrain and long distances, the kind of car that didn't draw attention on a highway but could handle roads most people avoided. He held his hand out. "The phone," he said. "Give it to me." Chloe hesitated only a second before placing it in his palm. Dante set it on the concrete, brought his heel down hard, and crushed it beyond any hope of signal. The sound of shattering plastic felt oddly final, like watching the last thread connecting her to her old life snap in half. "That was the only way they could track me now," Chloe said quietly, staring at the broken pieces. "Wasn't it?" "It was one way," Dante said, opening the passenger door for her. "Get in. I'll explain while we drive." They pulled out of the garage into a night that had turned violent. Thick clouds rolling low over the city, distant thunder rumbling like something waking up. Within minutes, rain came down in sheets, hard enough that the wipers struggled to keep up, headlights barely cutting through the downpour. Dante drove with the calm precision of a man who'd navigated worse storms than weather, eyes flicking constantly to the mirrors. "They'll trace the last known location back to my building eventually," he said. "That gives us a head start, but not a long one. We're heading east, out of Illinois, off the interstate cameras where we can manage it." "Where are we going?" Chloe asked, gripping the door handle as the vehicle hit a rough patch of flooded road. "Somewhere they won't think to look," Dante said. "Family property, off the grid. Nobody outside 3 people knows it exists." The storm worsened as they crossed into Indiana, lightning splitting the sky in long, jagged cracks that lit up the empty fields on either side of the highway. Chloe found herself watching Dante instead of the road, the way his hands stayed loose and steady on the wheel even as the wind shoved against the car, the way his eyes never stopped scanning, calculating, protecting. "You've done this before," she said eventually. "Run from something in the middle of the night." "More times than I'd like to admit," Dante said, "but never for someone who wasn't already part of my world." Chloe looked down at her hands, the duffel bag resting against her feet. "I keep waiting to regret trusting you. It hasn't happened yet." "Give it time," Dante said, a faint, tired smile tugging at his mouth, despite everything. "I'm not exactly easy to be around. You destroyed my phone, and now you're driving me through a hurricane," Chloe said. "I think we're past easy." For the first time since the platform, something like real laughter passed between them, quiet and brief, swallowed quickly by another crack of thunder. It didn't erase the fear sitting heavy in her chest, but it softened it slightly, made the next few hours feel survivable instead of impossible. Somewhere past the Indiana state line, the storm began to ease, rain thinning into a steady drizzle as the sky lightened at the edges with the first hint of dawn. Chloe found her eyes growing heavy, despite the adrenaline still humming beneath her skin. Exhaustion finally winning the argument her body had been losing since the train platform. "Sleep if you can," Dante said, noticing her eyelids drooping. "We've got hours left. I'll keep watch." "You haven't slept either," Chloe murmured, fighting to stay awake. "I don't need much," Dante said. "Not when there's something worth staying alert for." Chloe wanted to ask what he meant by that, whether he meant the drive still hidden in her bag or something else entirely. But sleep pulled her under before she could form the question. Outside the window, the storm faded into gray morning light, the road stretching ahead toward whatever safety Dante had promised her, somewhere past the reach of the men who wouldn't stop looking until they found her. For the first time in 3 days, she let herself believe she might actually make it there. The cabin sat tucked into a stretch of pine trees along the shore of Lake Michigan, far enough off the main road that Chloe hadn't seen another house in the last 20 minutes of the drive. Weathered wood, a stone chimney, wide windows facing the water. It looked like something out of an old postcard, peaceful in a way that felt almost unreal after the chaos of the last 2 days. "This belonged to my grandfather," Dante said, carrying her bag inside. "Nobody outside my immediate family knows it's still standing. No records tied to my name, no utility bills, nothing digital to trace." Chloe stepped through the door, taking in the simple furniture, the wood stove in the corner, the small kitchen that looked like it hadn't changed in decades. "It's beautiful," she said, surprised by how much she meant it. "It's quiet," Dante said, "which is what we need right now." That first afternoon, Chloe unpacked the hard drive and set up on the small wooden table near the window, the lake stretching out gray and calm beyond the glass. She'd been an auditor long enough to know her way around financial software, but the encryption protecting this drive was layered in a way she hadn't encountered before, each barrier she cracked revealing another one hiding just beneath it. Dante spent the day checking the cabin's perimeter, walking the tree line, testing the old motion sensors his family had installed years ago, making sure every entry point was secure. By evening, he came inside with an armful of firewood and found Chloe exactly where he'd left her, hunched over the laptop, dark circles forming under her eyes. "You need to eat something," he said, setting the wood down by the stove. "I need to finish this layer first," Chloe said, not looking up. "I'm close. You'll finish it faster with food in you." Dante moved to the small kitchen and started pulling ingredients from the cabinets. Simple things: canned vegetables, dried pasta, A few spices that had clearly been sitting there for longer than either of them wanted to think about. He cooked with the same quiet efficiency he did everything else. No wasted movement, no hesitation. Chloe finally looked up when the smell reached her. Something warm and rich cutting through the cold cabin air. "You cook, learned young," Dante said, stirring the pot. "My mother believed a man who couldn't feed himself had no business trying to lead anyone else." "Smart woman?" "She was," Dante said, something softening in his voice. "She passed a few years back. This place was hers before it was my grandfather's, technically. She used to bring me here every summer, away from the city, away from everything my father was building. Said it kept me honest." Chloe closed the laptop halfway, giving him her full attention for the first time all day. "Honest how?" Dante set 2 bowls on the table and sat across from her, the firelight catching the tired lines around his eyes. "My father ran things a certain way. Rough. Whatever it took, whoever it hurt, as long as the business grew. I watched what that cost him, watched it cost our family more than it ever earned. When I took over, I decided to build something different. We protect small operators. The shops and warehouses men like Marcus try to squeeze out or absorb. We don't touch anyone who isn't already trying to hurt someone weaker than them. That's not exactly the reputation people imagine when they hear the word syndicate," Chloe said. "No," Dante agreed, "but it's the only version I could live with running." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the fire crackling, wind moving softly through the pines outside. Chloe found herself studying him in a way she hadn't allowed herself to before, not as a threat, not as a stranger who'd swept her out of danger, but as a person carrying his own weight of choices and losses. "Tell me about the numbers," Dante said eventually, nodding toward the closed laptop. "Not the case. Why accounting?" Chloe almost laughed at the question, unused to anyone asking about her work, like it mattered beyond the emergency it had caused. "People think it's boring. Spreadsheets, columns, nothing exciting. But numbers don't lie. Not really. People lie. Numbers just show you where the lie is hiding, if you know how to look. I've always liked that, finding the truth buried under something someone worked hard to hide. Is that what happened with Marcus's files?" "That's exactly what happened," Chloe said, a spark of pride slipping through her exhaustion. Everything looked clean on the surface, perfectly balanced, perfectly boring. But the pattern underneath was screaming the second I knew where to look. I've never found anything that big before. Never anything that dangerous either. "You're good at this," Dante said, and it wasn't a compliment offered lightly. Genuinely good. Chloe felt heat rise in her cheeks, unused to praise landing so directly. "I used to think being good at something quiet like this meant I'd never matter much. Turns out quiet things can matter more than anyone expects." Dante didn't answer right away, just watched her across the table with an expression she couldn't quite read, something between admiration and quiet concern. "You matter," he said finally, "not just because of what's on that drive." The words settled between them, simple but heavier than either of them expected. Chloe looked down at her bowl, unsure how to respond to something that honest. Later that night, after the fire had burned low and Chloe had finally closed the laptop for the day, she sat wrapped in a blanket near the window, watching moonlight ripple across the lake. Dante sat nearby, close but not crowding her, close enough that the silence between them felt easy instead of tense. "2 days ago, I thought I was going to die on a train platform," Chloe said quietly. "Now I'm sitting in a cabin by a lake, and for a few minutes, I actually forgot to be afraid." "That's not a bad thing to forget," Dante said. Chloe glanced over at him, the firelight catching the edge of his jaw, and for the first time she let herself wonder what would happen once the danger passed, once Marcus was gone, and the drive was handed over, and there was no longer a reason for either of them to stay this close. She wasn't sure she wanted to find out. The answer was nothing. Chloe had been staring at the same screen for 6 hours straight when the final layer of encryption finally gave way. She sat back so fast, her chair scraped against the wooden floor, startling Dante from where he'd been repairing a loose hinge on the cabin's back door. "It's open," she said, breathless. "The whole thing, every account, every transfer, every offshore holding. Marcus has been hiding for 2 years. Dante crossed the room in seconds, leaning over her shoulder as rows of data filled the screen. Bank accounts registered in 3 different countries, shell companies stacked on top of each other like a house of cards, transaction records tracing money that had no business existing on paper at all. It was more than enough. It was everything. "This is it," Dante said quietly. "This ends him." Chloe felt a wave of relief, so strong it nearly brought tears to her eyes. 2 years of someone else's crimes finally laid bare after 3 days of running for her life. "We need to get this to someone who can actually use it." "My legal team," Dante said, already pulling out his own phone, then stopping himself, remembering the very reason they were hiding out here in the first place. "Not through this. Nothing digital that could be traced back to this location. There's a satellite uplink station in the town about 15 minutes from here. Secure line, no local network to intercept. I'll drive in, transmit the files directly, and we'll be done." "I'm coming with you," Chloe said immediately. "It's safer if you stay here." "I've been staring at a screen alone in this cabin for 2 days," Chloe said, standing up, some of her old stubbornness breaking through the exhaustion. "I need air. And that drive doesn't leave my sight until it's actually in the right hands." Dante studied her for a moment, weighing the risk, then nodded. "Stay close to me. If I say move, we move. No questions." The small lakeside town looked exactly like the kind of place nobody would think to search. A handful of shops lining a boardwalk that overlooked the water, a ferry terminal at the far end shuttling day visitors back and forth from the mainland. Dante parked near a side street and led Chloe toward the uplink station tucked behind a fishing supply store, the duffel bag secured tightly against her side. They were halfway down the boardwalk when Dante's steps slowed. "Don't look," he murmured, angling his body slightly to block her from view. 2 men near the ice cream stand. Don't recognize the faces, but the posture's wrong for tourists. Chloe's pulse spiked, every instinct screaming at her to run, but she forced herself to walk naturally, eyes forward, matching Dante's calm pace. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of them. 2 broad-shouldered men in plain jackets, eyes scanning the crowd with a sharpness that had nothing to do with enjoying a lakeside afternoon. "They're Marcus's," Dante said quietly. "Corporate enforcers, the kind that don't carry weapons in public but make problems disappear all the same." "How did they find this town?" "They didn't find you," Dante said. "They're canvassing every small town within driving range of the highway exit near my grandfather's property. Wide net, not a direct hit. Yet." They ducked into the crowd gathering near the boardwalk's midpoint, where a street musician had drawn a small audience, giving them cover to move without standing out. Dante guided her toward the ferry terminal instead of straight to the uplink station, weaving through tourists boarding the afternoon crossing. "Change of plan," he said under his breath. "We use the crowd to lose them, circle back for the uplink once they've moved on." They blended into the line boarding the ferry, Dante keeping one arm loosely around Chloe's shoulders, playing the part of a couple heading out for the afternoon. Behind them, one of the enforcers had drifted closer, scanning faces near the ticket booth, close enough that Chloe's breath caught in her throat. "Just breathe," Dante murmured. "Look at me, not them." She forced herself to meet his eyes, and for a moment, the fear in her chest softened into something steadier, anchored by how calm he stayed, even with danger, standing 30 feet away. The ferry horn sounded, the line shuffled forward, and the enforcer's attention finally drifted toward a delivery truck pulling into the lot, distracted by something unrelated entirely. They slipped out of the boarding line at the last second, doubling back through a gap between two shops, while the ferry pulled away without them, a decoy neither enforcer thought twice about. By the time they reached the uplink station, the street behind them was empty, the two men nowhere in sight, likely still watching a boat that no longer held anyone worth chasing. Inside the small station, Dante transmitted the files in under 3 minutes. Encrypted and routed through servers, even his own men couldn't easily trace back to this town. When the confirmation came through, he let out a slow breath, the first real sign of tension leaving his shoulders since they'd left the cabin. "It's done," he said. "My legal team has everything. By tomorrow morning, this becomes their problem to unravel, not just something buried in a hard drive." Chloe leaned against the counter, adrenaline finally draining out of her all at once, leaving her legs unsteady. "I thought for a second they were going to see us." "They almost did," Dante admitted. "That's twice now we've been closer than I'd like." "Twice?" "The train station wasn't the only place they got close," Dante said, hesitating slightly before continuing. "They tracked your phone signal to a block near my building the same night I destroyed it. If we'd left 10 minutes later, they would have seen exactly which building we drove out of." Chloe stared at him, the weight of how close they'd come to being caught settling heavier than it had in the moment itself. "You didn't tell me that. I didn't want you carrying more fear than you already were," Dante said. "But you deserve to know how careful we still need to be. This isn't over, not until Marcus is finished completely." They walked back to the car in silence, the boardwalk behind them returning to its normal rhythm, tourists and gulls and the smell of the lake, as if nothing dangerous had happened there at all. But Chloe knew better now. Danger didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it walked past you in a crowd, close enough to touch, and kept moving only because luck happened to be on your side. She just hoped their luck held a little longer. The move to Detroit happened faster than Chloe expected. One phone call from Dante the morning after the boardwalk, and by early afternoon they were standing in a high-rise office suite overlooking the river, sleek and modern in a way that felt worlds apart from the quiet cabin they'd left behind. "This building is registered under a shell company 2 steps removed from anything with my name on it," Dante explained, leading her through a glass-walled office lined with monitors. "Secure servers, private security on every floor, and nobody outside my closest circle knows we're here. You just have properties like this scattered everywhere," Chloe said, only half joking. "Comes with the business," Dante said. "This one's usually reserved for negotiations I can't afford to have overheard." Chloe set up at the main workstation, the transmitted files now backed by the full processing power of a proper office system instead of a laptop running on cabin electricity. Her job now wasn't decryption anymore. That part was finished. It was compilation, turning raw financial chaos into a report clean enough, precise enough, that no investor or compliance board could dismiss it as speculation. She worked through the first night almost without stopping, fueled by coffee Dante kept refilling, and a stubborn determination to get every number exactly right. He stayed close, not hovering, but present, reviewing pages as she finished them, occasionally pointing out a connection she'd missed between 2 accounts that otherwise looked unrelated. "You catch patterns fast," Chloe said around 2 in the morning, surprised at how naturally he moved through financial structures most people would find impossible to follow. "I've spent a decade reading contracts men wrote specifically to confuse people like me," Dante said. "You learn to see through it eventually." By the second day, the report was nearly finished. Over 60 pages of transaction trails, shell company registrations, and offshore transfers, all laid out with the kind of clarity that left no room for argument. Chloe leaned back from the screen, rubbing her eyes, feeling something like pride settle over the exhaustion. "This is going to end him," she said quietly. "Everything he built on lies, gone, because I stayed late one night, checking numbers nobody wanted me to see. Because you're better at your job than anyone gave you credit for," Dante said, sitting across from her, close enough that she could see the tiredness in his own eyes, matched with something warmer underneath it. "I've had people on my payroll for years who couldn't have put this together as cleanly as you did in a week." Chloe felt heat rise in her cheeks again, the same reaction she'd been fighting since the cabin, the same pull she'd been trying to convince herself was just gratitude and adrenaline. "You keep saying things like that because they're true," Dante said simply. The air between them shifted, quieter than before, charged with something neither of them had said out loud yet. Chloe found herself studying the line of his jaw, the way exhaustion hadn't dulled the sharpness in his eyes, the steadiness that had carried her through 3 near misses without ever cracking. "Dante," she started, unsure exactly what she meant to say next. Her laptop chimed sharply, cutting through the moment, an automated alert, flagging a final cross-reference she'd set running hours earlier, comparing account signatures across every document in the drive. Chloe frowned, turning back to the screen, expecting nothing more than a routine match. What she found instead made her go completely still. "Dante," she said again, this time with an edge of alarm, "you need to see this." He leaned over her shoulder, following her cursor, to a signature buried 3 layers deep in one of Marcus's shell transactions, a routing authorization that required a secondary approval code. The code matched an account Chloe had flagged earlier without realizing its significance. Dante's face changed the moment he recognized it. "That's not one of Marcus's people," he said, voice low and hard. "That access code belongs to someone inside my own organization." Chloe's stomach dropped. "Someone you trust. Someone who's had access to my shipment schedules for the last 3 years, Dante said, straightening slowly, the warmth from moments earlier replaced entirely by something colder, more focused. "That's how Marcus knew where to intercept my shipment the night I found you at the station. That's how his men knew which building to search for you. Someone's been feeding him information the entire time. Do you know who?" Dante's jaw tightened. "I have a guess. I don't want to believe it, but the timeline fits too well not to." Chloe watched him process the betrayal in real time, the same controlled stillness he wore during danger settling over him now, sharper and more dangerous for being turned inward instead of outward. She reached out, resting her hand lightly on his arm, an instinct rather than a decision. "This changes things," she said quietly. "Doesn't it? Marcus isn't the only threat anymore." "No," Dante said. "It means someone close to me has been helping him stay one step ahead this entire time, which means when I walk into that boardroom to hand this evidence over, I need to know exactly who I can trust standing beside me, and who's going to try to stop this from ever reaching the people who need to see it." Chloe felt the fear return, sharper this time, laced with something new, worry not just for herself now, but for him. "Be careful, please." Dante looked down at her hand, still resting on his arm, then met her eyes, something unguarded passing between them that neither danger nor exhaustion could fully hide. "I didn't expect any of this," he said quietly. "Not the platform, not the storm, not sitting here at 3 in the morning realizing I'd rather have you safe than have this entire war won without you." Chloe's breath caught. Whatever she'd been about to say before the alert interrupted them suddenly felt smaller than what was sitting between them now. Honest and unplanned, and far more dangerous than any hard drive. "Finish the report," Dante said finally, stepping back before either of them could say something neither was ready for yet. "I need to make a call nobody else can hear." He left the room, and Chloe sat alone with 60 pages of evidence and a new fear settling into her chest, one that had nothing to do with Marcus Vane at all. Somewhere close to Dante, someone had been lying to him for years, and she had no idea what he'd do once he found out who. Dante left Detroit before sunrise, the finished report secured in an encrypted case beside him, 3 of his most trusted men flanking the vehicle, in a convoy that took a different route back to Chicago than anyone tracking his movements would expect. He'd left Chloe behind under maximum security, 2 guards outside her door, and instructions that nobody, absolutely nobody, was to know her location except the small circle he trusted completely, which, as of last night, was a much smaller circle than it used to be. He'd made the call from the Detroit office at 3 in the morning, quiet and controlled, requesting a full review of shipment authorization logs going back 3 years. By the time he landed back in Chicago, the answer was waiting for him, confirmed and undeniable. Robert Halloway. 12 years with the family, a man who'd started as a driver and worked his way up to overseeing half of Dante's logistics scheduling. A man Dante had trusted enough to leave alone in rooms full of sensitive information without a second thought. Dante confronted him privately, in a locked office at the company's legitimate headquarters. No witnesses, no theatrics. He laid the authorization codes on the desk between them and watched Robert's face go from confusion to resignation in the span of a few seconds. "Marcus paid better than loyalty ever did," Robert said quietly, not bothering to deny it once the evidence was in front of him. 3 years ago, my daughter needed treatment insurance wouldn't cover. Marcus's people found me, offered enough to save her life. I told myself once wouldn't matter. Then once became years. Dante felt the old anger rise, sharp and immediate, but underneath it sat something heavier, a tired understanding of how desperation could bend even loyal men into shapes they never wanted to become. "You put a woman's life in danger. You compromised everything I've spent years building." "I know," Robert said, no defense left in him. "I've known for a long time." Dante didn't reach for violence. That had never been the currency he dealt in. Not with people who worked for him, not even now. Instead, he stripped Robert of every position, every access code, every connection to the organization, and made it clear that if Marcus's network so much as heard his name again in relation to any future dealings, the consequences would extend far past a lost job. It wasn't mercy exactly. It was the only version of justice Dante knew how to give a man who'd been cornered by circumstances rather than greed. With the leak sealed, Dante turned his full attention to the boardroom waiting for him downtown. The meeting had been arranged carefully, not by Dante directly, but through his legal team, framed as an urgent compliance review requested by concerned shareholders who'd received an anonymous but thoroughly documented report. Marcus Vane arrived, expecting a routine quarterly discussion. What he found instead was a room full of his own investors, compliance officers, and legal counsel, each holding a copy of 60 pages, detailing exactly how deep his corruption ran. Dante sat quietly near the back of the room, close enough to watch, far enough to let the evidence speak entirely for itself. Marcus's composure cracked slowly at first, confident denials met with specific dates, specific account numbers, transaction trails too precise to dismiss as coincidence or fabrication. His own lawyers exchanged glances that told him everything before the meeting had even reached its midpoint. By the time the compliance board's lead officer read aloud the total sum of misappropriated funds, the room had gone utterly silent, the kind of silence that only settled over people watching an empire collapse in real time. "This is fabricated," Marcus said, his voice losing the confidence it had carried into the room. "Someone's trying to destroy my company. The routing signatures match your personal authorization codes," the compliance officer said flatly. Codes only you and your senior financial officer had access to. We've already confirmed authenticity with 3 independent banks. Marcus's eyes swept the room, searching for an ally, someone willing to argue on his behalf, and found nothing but investors already calculating how quickly they needed to distance themselves from the scandal about to break. Dante watched him understand, in real time, that the war he'd waged quietly for over a year had just ended, without a single shot fired, without a single threat exchanged. Defeated entirely by numbers, he'd been careless enough to believe nobody would ever fully uncover. By that afternoon, the board had voted unanimously to strip Marcus of his position, freeze every account connected to his name, and turn the full report over to federal regulators for further investigation. Marcus left the building through a side entrance, avoiding the small crowd of reporters who'd somehow already caught wind that something significant was unfolding downtown. Within 48 hours, sources confirmed he'd left the country entirely, his territory, his investors, and his reputation left in ruins behind him. Dante stood outside the building afterward, the cold Chicago air a sharp contrast to the tension that had followed him for the better part of 2 weeks. His phone buzzed. A message from the security detail in Detroit. Short and simple. She's safe. No incidents. He let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding since the train platform, since the moment he'd first seen Chloe shivering on that bench with a bag she refused to let go of. The threat that had chased her across 4 states, that had cost him a trusted employee's loyalty and nearly cost Chloe her life more than once, was finally, completely gone. He thought about calling her immediately, hearing her voice, telling her it was over. Instead, he found himself wanting to see her face when he said it, wanting to be standing in front of her instead of speaking through a screen, the same way he'd wanted to be close to her every day since the storm. Dante got back in the car and gave the driver new directions, away from the office, toward the airport, toward Detroit, and the woman waiting there, who had no idea her entire life had just been given back to her. Whatever came next, whatever this thing between them had become, somewhere between a freezing train platform and a lakefront cabin, Dante intended to find out in person. 2 weeks had passed since Marcus Vane's name disappeared from every boardroom in Chicago, and the city had already moved on the way cities always did, distracted by the next headline, the next scandal, the next thing worth talking about. But for Chloe, those 2 weeks had felt like an entirely different life unfolding, one where she no longer flinched at unfamiliar cars slowing near her building, one where sleep came without the fear of waking up somewhere unfamiliar and cold. She'd moved back into her own apartment the week after Detroit, though it felt strange at first, quiet, in a way that reminded her too much of everything she'd almost lost. Her sister had cried on the phone for 20 minutes straight, once Chloe finally explained enough of the story to make sense of her sudden disappearance. Work had given her an extended leave, still unaware of the full truth behind why one of their auditors had vanished for nearly 2 weeks. Life, slowly, was rebuilding itself around her, but something had changed permanently. And it wasn't just her sense of safety. Dante had visited twice since Detroit. Quiet dinners that felt nothing like the frantic days of running from state to state. Conversations that lingered long after the food went cold. Neither of them had said the words yet, the ones that had been sitting unspoken since that night in the Detroit office when Dante admitted he'd rather have her safe than win any war without her. But Chloe felt them building every time he looked at her, every time his hand found hers without either of them planning it. So when he texted asking her to meet him at a park along the lakefront on a bright Saturday afternoon, she didn't think twice before saying yes. The park was busy, with the easy energy of a warm afternoon, families spread across blankets, the lake stretching out calm and blue, under a sky finally clear of storms. Chloe spotted Dante near a bench overlooking the shoreline, dressed simply, None of the sharp, tailored suits she'd grown used to seeing him in during their 2 weeks on the run. He looked, for the first time since she'd met him, completely at ease. "You look different," she said, walking up beside him. "I feel different," Dante said, turning to face her, something warm and unguarded in his expression that she hadn't seen even during their quietest moments at the cabin. "I stepped back from the syndicate 3 days ago, handed the daily operations over to people I trust completely now, people who've earned it. I'm building something new instead, a legitimate corporate security firm, using everything I know about protecting people and protecting businesses, but doing it without needing to hide any of it." Chloe's eyes widened, genuinely surprised. "You're really doing that?" "I told you once that Marcus's downfall meant I could finally focus on the kind of life I actually wanted," Dante said. "Turns out watching you take apart his entire empire with nothing but spreadsheets and stubbornness made me realize how much I wanted to build something honest instead of just something powerful." "I didn't do it alone," Chloe said, a small smile tugging at her mouth. "I had some help from a man who destroyed my phone and drove me through a hurricane. Best decision I made all year," Dante said, and the warmth in his voice made her chest tighten in the best possible way. They walked along the lakefront path together, the city skyline rising behind them, sunlight scattering off the water in bright, restless patterns. Dante told her about the new firm, about the first clients already lined up, small businesses who'd heard through quiet channels that someone finally wanted to protect them without asking for anything twisted in return. Chloe listened, feeling something settle in her chest that she hadn't expected, pride, and something warmer underneath it that she was no longer trying to talk herself out of. They stopped near the edge of the water, where the path curved out toward a small overlook, the same lake that had witnessed their quiet nights at the cabin, now stretching out in front of them under an entirely different kind of light. "I keep thinking about the platform," Chloe said softly, watching the water. "How close I came to not making it through that night, how different everything would be if you hadn't been standing there." "I think about that too," Dante admitted. "But mostly, I think about what came after. How something that started as danger turned into the best thing that's happened to me in years." Chloe turned to face him, her heart beating fast in a way that had nothing to do with fear anymore. "Dante, let me finish," he said gently, reaching for her hands, holding them steady between his own. "I've spent my whole life protecting things, my family's business, the people who work for me, the small operators nobody else bothered defending. I was good at protecting things because I never let myself get close enough to actually need anything back. You changed that. Somewhere between that storm and that cabin, I stopped just wanting to keep you safe. I started wanting to build a life with you in it." Chloe's breath caught, tears gathering at the edges of her eyes, not from fear this time, but from something entirely different. "I'm not asking you to walk into danger again," Dante continued. "That part of my life is over. I'm asking you to walk into something new with me instead, as my partner, in everything. The business, the life I'm building now, all of it. I don't want to do any of this without you standing beside me." Chloe laughed softly through the tears gathering in her eyes, squeezing his hands tighter. "You do realize we met because I was freezing to death on a bench and clutching evidence against a criminal empire. Best first impression I've ever had," Dante said, a genuine smile breaking across his face. "Yes," Chloe said, before he could even fully ask the question hanging between them. "Yes, I want to build this with you." Dante pulled her into him, the lake breeze wrapping around them both, and for a long moment, neither of them said anything else, letting the quiet afternoon replace every storm that had come before it. What began as a chance encounter on a freezing train platform had become something neither of them could have predicted. A partnership forged through danger and decryption and quiet nights by a lakeside fire, now stepping into a future built on something far stronger than fear. Their story, born from a storm nobody expected, had finally found its calm.